During my university years, I was always involved in social media. After graduating, I didn't go out to work. I set up a studio and started working from home. But after being at home for 2 months, my brother's wife, Patrícia, began making my life difficult. I've never seen anyone graduate and stay at home living off their parents. Don't you have any shame? I ignored her, but she kept going, trying to address me by name. Lúcia, if you want to stay here, fine. Starting next month, the rent will be $1,000, food will cost $2,000, and services are paid separately. I laughed at the situation. She lived off me and still had the nerve to act as if she were superior. One day, after returning from a trip, I found all my things thrown out in a disorderly manner in the garden. Patrícia came out of the house and looked at me with disdain. I looked at my scattered belongings, including a vintage lamp I had collected with such care, now broken. I shouted, "Mom, who threw my things out here?" My mom, Marta, quickly descended from the second floor when she saw me in the garden. "Lúcia, no one threw your things away." I frowned, confused by what I saw. If no one threw my things away, then what is this? They were perfectly in my room. Why are they out here? Marta looked at the house and then at me, saying, "No one threw them away, we just needed to free up a room." Free up a room? My room? Marta looked away and nodded reluctantly. Patrícia's sister is coming to study in this city. She won't stay in the dormitory. She'll stay with us. I laughed in disbelief. So you want to evict me for her? Marta stayed silent, not saying a word. I was shaking with anger at seeing my mother act this way. I tried to hold back my frustration. There's another room. Why can't she stay there? Why do I have to be the one to move? Marta just lowered her head, twisting the hem of her clothes. It seemed like I was the one being unreasonable, as if she were the victim, not me. Patrícia, standing by the door, sobbed with sarcasm. I've never seen anyone graduate and stay at home living off their parents. Don't you have any shame? I bit my tongue and didn't respond. She wasn't really my sister. Resolving conflicts with her was hard. Seeing that I ignored her, she shouted aggressively, "Lúcia, I'm talking to you. If you want to stay here, fine. Starting next month, the rent will be $15,000, food will cost $2,000, and services are charged separately." I had heard her sarcasm so many times that it usually didn't bother me. But this time, she had the audacity to point her finger at me and speak directly. "Am I living off you? Am I eating your food or using your things? What right do you have to criticize me?" Since she married into the family, Patrícia hadn't worked a single day. My brother, Fernando, a man with little determination, couldn't keep a job for more than 3 months. He always complained about his colleagues or bosses, making excuses to clean the work environment. He had quit so many times that no one would hire him anymore. Now, they both relied almost entirely on my parents' support. And where did my parents' money come from? Wasn't it thanks to me? Maybe Patrícia didn't know, but Fernando had seen me give money to Marta many times and even joked about my filial piety. I wanted harmony in the family, because they were my family. I didn't complain when my parents used my money to support Fernando and Patrícia. I bought a house and renovated it. They moved in with Fernando, and I didn't say a word. They had forgotten that this was my house. After living here for a few years, they forgot that I was the one sustaining this family. Patrícia looked at me with disdain, as if my indignation was ridiculous to her. She looked at my mom and sarcastically said, "Marta, say something. Wasn't this a decision that the whole family agreed on? Why does it seem like I'm the only villain here?" The whole family had agreed on this decision. On a hot summer afternoon, under the scorching sun, I felt like I had fallen into an ice pit. The whole family agreed on this decision? I looked at Marta in disbelief. Is that true? Did the whole family agree on this? Am I not part of this family? Marta avoided my gaze. And suddenly, I felt overwhelmed, shouting, "Answer me!" Surprised by my outburst, my mom raised her face, tears in her eyes. Perhaps the confusion outside was already too loud, because my dad, Raul, and my brother, Fernando, finally came out of the house. What's going on? Lucia, you're out of control. Why are you shouting at your mother? Raul and Fernando spoke in unison. I looked at them and asked. Patricia said the whole family decided to kick me out. Is that true? If I don't leave, do I have to pay rent and services every month? Raul sighed and said, It's not like that. Patricia's sister is only going to stay for a few days, so we suggested you rent a place for a while. We're not kicking you out. Why would I need to rent a place? Even if her sister wants to stay, isn't there another room? Can't we figure something out? Does it have to be my room? And did everyone decide that together? Am I not part of this family? Today I need a clear answer from you. Someone threw my things away. Who did this? They better return it immediately. The vintage lamp that was broken costs $18,000. Whoever broke it, give me the money now. After I finished speaking, Patricia exploded when she heard my name. You always eat and drink for free and take our money to travel, but you spent $18,000 on a broken lamp. I looked at her and laughed softly. Eat and drink for free. Take your money to travel. Is your money, Patricia? She retorted. Raul and Marta's money is our money. Have you ever seen me ask them for money? Ask them if I've ever asked for money to travel. Since I started college, have I ever taken a penny from this family? Patricia seemed confused. I looked at Raul and Marta, firmly questioning them. Come on, tell her. Have I ever asked you for money? Marta kept her head down, not saying anything. Raul frowned with an expression that seemed to ask, Lucia, when did you get so aggressive? I laughed in anger. Don't change the subject. Just say it. Have I ever asked you for money? Fernando's face also grew serious, and he scolded me. Lucia, is this how you speak to your parents? I didn't argue with him. I held Marta's arm. She looked at me, and I stared into her eyes, asking, Since I started college, have I ever asked you and Dad for a single cent? She shook her head frantically, tears running down her face. No, you never asked. I turned to Patricia, raising an eyebrow. Did you hear that? No, not a single cent. Patricia seemed stunned. Maybe because I sounded so sure of myself, or maybe because she heard Marta admit it. She still seemed reluctant to believe it and wanted to say something else, but Fernando interrupted her. Enough. He looked at her angrily, and she shut her mouth. I knew that by now. Continuing to argue didn't make sense. I was destined to leave this family. But this was my house. Why should I leave? It's not a permanent decision. I asked with an ironic smile, trying to keep my composure. Then why were my things thrown in the garden? Why was my room taken without any explanation or consideration? Patricia was speechless. Her attempt to justify herself quickly faded in the face of the harshness of the situation. Fernando, on the other hand, seemed uncomfortable, fidgeting in his chair, not knowing what to do or say. I continued to look at each of them, challenging them to deny what was right before their eyes. I'm not a bottomless pit for everyone's problems. I've worked hard to build my life, and I did it with a desire to help, but I've never seen an ounce of gratitude, I said firmly, my voice filled with bitterness. Marta, with tears in her eyes, tried to intervene, but I wouldn't let her. It's no use anymore, Mom. I've seen how things stand here. I know exactly how I'm viewed, I replied, turning to face them all. Just give me a clear answer. If I stay here, will I have to pay rent and expenses? Or will I be ignored while you welcome anyone else but me? Raul looked at everyone with an expression of exhaustion, as if trying to understand what was happening but didn't know how to handle it. He shook his head, trying to speak, but couldn't. I don't deserve this, I murmured, almost to myself. The tension in the room was palpable. Each of them had their reasons and justifications, but nothing could erase the fact that I was being treated as a stranger in my own home. Patricia, now more nervous, stood up abruptly and turned to Marta. Mom, are you going to stay silent while she humiliates us like this? Say something. Marta, with tears in her eyes, finally raised her voice. Lucia, we just wanted to help Clara. But you're right. Maybe we've been insensitive to you. I looked at her, and my heart tightened. The pain of being ignored by my own mother was stronger than anything else I could have said at that moment. It's not about Clara. It's not about anyone else. All I asked for was respect, something all of you owe me. I'm tired of being invisible to you. I've spent too much time living in everyone's shadow, I said, my voice breaking. The following minutes were filled with heavy silence. No response that mattered. Deep down, I knew nothing could change at that moment. It was clear to me how my family felt and what they thought. "You want to force us out of the house now?" he asked, his eyes burning with anger and desperation. I looked at him calmly, my emotions under control, though his words stung. "I'm not forcing anyone out, Dad. You've had years of support, and now I'm simply asking for something in return. It's only fair." Fernando, sitting beside my father, jumped in, his tone defensive. "You can't just throw us out like this. We've been family for years, and now you're treating us like this." I felt the anger rise inside me, but I held it back. I couldn't let them manipulate the situation. "You think this is about throwing you out? This is about respecting me for once in my life," I said, my voice firm. "This is my property, and I've supported all of you for far too long. You didn't seem to have a problem with that when it was convenient." Fernando opened his mouth to speak again, but I cut him off. "I'm done listening to your justifications, Fernando. You've been relying on me for years, and I'm finally stopping. No more favors, no more support. You're going to have to face the consequences of your own actions now." My father, though furious, fell silent, as if realizing the weight of my words. His usual anger and accusations seemed to dissipate, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Maybe regret, or maybe guilt. "You don't know what you're doing, Lucia. This will tear this family apart," he said quietly, almost pleading. I shook my head. "You're right, Dad. But it's already been torn apart. I'm just the one who's been pretending it wasn't." The room was heavy with the silence that followed. My father, usually quick to argue, had nothing more to say. Fernando seemed lost for words, and even my mother, who had been sending constant texts and calling me, was now silent, perhaps realizing the truth in what I said. I walked towards the door, turning to them one last time. "You have 1 month. After that, I want you gone," I said, my voice no longer emotional, just final. "This is my decision, and I'm not changing my mind." With that, I left the house. The weight of years of sacrifice, of being ignored and treated like an afterthought, seemed to lift off my shoulders. As I stepped into the cool night air, I knew that this was the hardest thing I had ever done, but also the most freeing. The next few weeks were filled with tension and anger for my family. They continued to call and send messages, trying to make me feel guilty, but I refused to give in. I had made my decision, and nothing they said would change it. When the day came for them to leave the house, I didn't feel victorious or satisfied. It was just a moment of quiet finality. They left with their things packed, each one carrying their own version of resentment and pain. As for me, I was alone, but I was no longer burdened. I had finally taken control of my life, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew it was mine to walk. I took a deep breath, trying not to let the emotions overwhelm me. "Dad, the house is mine. You're here because I allowed you to stay. For all these years, I've been the one supporting this family, covering the bills, doing everything so you could live well." I stared at both of them firmly. "And still, you chose someone else. Someone who isn't even part of the family to take my place." I leaned slightly forward. "What did you expect me to do? Bow my head once again?" My brother intervened, his eyes cold and calculating, as if preparing a strategy to make me relent. "Don't you think you're overreacting, Lucia? After all, it's just a room. Why all this?" I laughed with disdain. "Just a room? If it were really just a room, you would have given yours to Clara. But no, you preferred to take mine, humiliate me, throw my things in the garden as if I were a stranger. It's not about the room. It's about the respect you never gave me." My father insisted, saying I was putting money above family and that I should forgive them. But I wasn't willing to forgive. I'm tired of giving without receiving anything in return. Now, You'll learn what it's like to live without depending on me." They tried to argue, but I stood my ground. It was decided. When they finally accepted that I wouldn't give in, silence fell over the room. I stood up and motioned to the door, signaling that the conversation was over. "You have 30 days to vacate the property," I said calmly, with no room for rebuttal. They left, but they knew my decision was final. The following days were filled with desperate attempts for my family to make me change my mind. My mother tried to manipulate me emotionally, sending messages saying I was insensitive and ungrateful. Fernando and Patricia used the old family is everything speech, claiming that I was destroying their childhood home, conveniently ignoring the fact that I was the one truly responsible for keeping that home running. With each message I received, my heart hardened even more. I remembered the moments when I sacrificed my own desires and needs so they could live comfortably. The truth was, they never truly valued me. To them, I had always been the daughter who provided support, but never the one they would make sacrifices for. On the 25th day, Fernando and Patricia still hadn't shown signs of moving out. I realized they were betting that I would give in, that I wouldn't have the courage to take more drastic measures. I decided it was time to act. On the morning of the 26th day, I went to the house and found Patricia in the garden, watering plants I had bought. She looked at me with a mocking expression, perhaps thinking I was there to back down. I smiled coldly. "Patricia, I came to check if you've started packing. The deadline is running out." She shrugged, feigning indifference. "You're not really going to kick us out, Lucia? You think you can do that?" I approached without breaking eye contact. "I've made my decision, Patricia. If you don't leave peacefully in 4 days, I'll have to take legal action." She scoffed but didn't say anything else. As I walked away, I saw in her eyes the understanding that I was serious. In the remaining days, I kept in touch with my lawyer, who assured me that if they didn't leave voluntarily, I could file for an immediate eviction. The next day, I returned to the house with the lawyer, ready to settle everything once and for all. This time, the whole family was gathered in the living room, a mixture of anger and resignation in their expressions. The lawyer explained formally that if they didn't vacate the house that same day, he would initiate the eviction process, which could lead to additional costs and complications for them. My mother began to cry, while my father maintained a defeated look. Fernando and Patricia, on the other hand, didn't hide the hatred they felt, but that no longer affected me. After much discussion, they finally began packing their things. I saw my parents leave with grim faces, and Fernando and Patricia threw me looks of contempt as they exited, as if I were the villain in a tragedy they had created. But I no longer cared. For many years, I had been the forgotten hero, the one holding everything up without receiving anything in return. Now, it was my turn to take care of myself. Once they left, I entered the house and felt the silence settle into every corner. For the first time in years, that house was truly mine. I walked through each room, rediscovering the details, thinking about how I would renovate it to reflect the life I truly wanted to have. My family had used and belittled me, but now I had broken free from all of that. For the first time, I felt truly at peace.